Today we are waking up in New Orleans, Louisiana. Again, it's our third day. And today I'm gonna take it down a notch. Yesterday was really funny and I enjoyed doing the filming locations on 21 Jump Street. But you see, I've never been here. And 15 years ago, one of the worst natural disasters in human history completely destroyed New Orleans, Louisiana. And because I've never been here, I've never had a chance to talk about it. So today I'm taking it down a little bit with the story of Hurricane Katrina. You know, a lot of for years and years, I just assumed that Hurricane Katrina was it. That's what caused so much destruction and devastation and death here in New Orleans. But truth be told, that's not the case at all. It was human error that caused most of the damage, and I didn't even know it. I do know it now, and I'm going to talk about it today. So today I'm going to talk about Katrina, as I said, the human error that caused this entire city to flood, caused so much devastation. It was horrendous. Again, it's going to be a somber day because of the story. It's a very dark story, but it'll be an interesting one.
Thanks for noticing.
But Hurricane Katrina was a Category 5 tropical cyclone or tropical hurricane that hit New Orleans head on almost 15 years ago. Now we're, what, a month, just a little over a month away from its anniversary. By now though, all these years later, I'm sure that there is not a soul on the planet who hasn't heard about Hurricane Katrina in some way, shape, or form. Here in Alabama, we got a lot of evacuees from New Orleans who they left as the storm was about to hit and have now settled into a home here away from that coastline. Hurricane Katrina killed over 1,200 people that day. She caused over $125 billion worth of damage, as nearly all of New Orleans was underwater by the time it was over. They estimate more than 80% of New Orleans was underwater by the end of that day. Most of all the damage come from the flooding. And even though the flooding was blamed on Hurricane Katrina, it actually stemmed from flaws in the flood protection system around New Orleans, which they're called levees. The levees failing caused most all of the flooding. It caused almost all the damage, and it's even responsible for almost all of the deaths. As the levees failed around New Orleans, water came rushing in. It destroyed New Orleans' transportation and communication facilities. That left the tens of thousands of residents who hadn't evacuated, it left them stranded and homeless. In most cases, they had no access to food, water, shelter, or even the basic necessities that we need to survive. The absolute massive scale of the disaster provoked a massive national and international emergency response effort. After the water had succeeded, the emergency response of the federal, the state, and the local governments, they were widely criticized. That resulted in the resignations of quite a few top-level government personnel, like the director of FEMA resigned due to the criticism of how he responded to the disaster. Ultimately, though, after years of investigations, after Katrina had passed, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, they were blamed for the levees failing. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers had designed and built those levees decades earlier, and they were responsible for monitoring and their upkeep. Well, over the course of the investigation, it was discovered that they had not pretty much done either one of them. They discovered that they had not done any upkeep on the levees, and that their definition of monitoring involved an engineer just driving up beside the levee, looking at it and saying, oh, it looks okay, without even getting out of the car to see it. Now, even though the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers was to blame for the disaster because of a sovereign immunity in the Flood Control Act of 1928 passed in Louisiana, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers could not be held financially responsible. So there's nothing anybody could do to them because of it. Now, you know, it wasn't Hurricane Katrina that actually caused all the flood. I mean, it was. Hurricane Katrina was the catalyst for it. But poorly designed levee systems and using the cheapest materials possible to build those levee systems was really to blame for the flooding and the massive disaster right here in New Orleans. Now that you know what happened and the negligence that took place that caused that destruction on August the 29th of 2005, we're gonna look a little bit deeper at how that day unfolded. At 4:30 a.m., as Katrina's outer bands were bearing down on Lake Pontchartrain, a small leak is reported in the levee near I-10. At 5:30 a.m., storm surges from Hurricane Katrina caused two channels to meet on the St. Bernard Parish side of New Orleans, causing a surge of water to flow over the retaining wall. It caused the now infamous funnel as the enormous amounts of water tried to flow into the industrial canal, initiating the flooding of New Orleans.
The levees and flood walls protecting greater New Orleans were poorly designed, poorly built, according to investigators, and not even close to being finished. Here on the east side of the London Avenue Canal, when Katrina hit, storm surge came rushing in from the lake. Drainage water came rushing out from the city. The canal filled with water. 30 feet of this flood wall came crashing down, inundating this neighborhood with floodwater.
And then at 6:30, a large section of the 17th Street Canal flood wall broke free. As a result, a 10-foot wall of water entered the city, destroying row after row after row of houses. That wall of water continued moving inland for nearly 2 hours. At 7:45 a.m., the surges of water in the canal were so intense, it caused a massive section of flood wall to collapse, sending an 18-foot wall of water into New Orleans' lower 9th Ward. To the people that were still in their homes riding out the storm, they thought they were safe in their houses, but it was almost instantaneous. The water was so powerful that it carved out a gap in the earth behind the flood wall, and it actually shoved that flood wall forward nearly 60 feet. It would go on to destroy the first 9 rows of houses, and it's here the greatest number of people were killed.
Lower 9th Ward, probably the hardest hit area in New Orleans now because of Hurricane Katrina. Let me show you what's going on right here on live television. There's a boat here, rescue operation of the Harbor Police and New Orleans Police moving in people who have been trapped in their homes here in the lower 9th Ward because of the extremely high water. It is probably about 10 feet high over much of this area, covering all the way up to some homes up to the roof level.
At 8:15 a.m., the Orleans Canal is overtopped, flooding City Park. At 8:30 a.m., a 1-mile stretch of levee behind the lakefront airport is overtopped, with surge coming in from Lake Pontchartrain. At 9:30 a.m., the London Avenue levee gives way, sending a 12-foot wall of water destroying the nearby neighborhoods. Again, the surges had carved out so much of the earth behind the flood wall that the concrete wall actually fell into a deep hole and the water rushed in.
That straight ahead is the London Outfall Canal. Over there is the greatest break of the levee. Now, there's a huge chunk of concrete You can imagine the force that blew away concrete. If we had to go downstairs to that front door to try to get out, I can't swim a lick.
At 10:30 a.m., another large section of the 17th Street Canal levee broke. The water flowed into the already flooded lower Ninth Ward, ensuring the total devastation of this part of New Orleans. Throughout the rest of the day, all of this water would continue flowing and meeting up with other areas that had been flooded. The water was running so fast in some areas that whitewater rapids were reported on the streets in a few places in downtown New Orleans. It's crazy. Within 24 hours that day, on August the 29th, Orleans Parish was completely underwater. It had been sunken because the flood walls did not hold up. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has since replaced the levees in New Orleans, this time doing it the supposed right way. But right after it happened, the whole thing was a mess. I mean, it was an absolute mess. Survivors spent days and even weeks without getting supplies. Tens of thousands of people piled into the Superdome and the convention center, just living in deplorable conditions with trash and feces all around them, just waiting to be rescued. Now, everyone blamed FEMA for the lack of response. Even to this day, people still think FEMA was to blame for that. But what they didn't know, and they probably still don't know, is the lack of response rests solely on then Governor Kathleen Blanco. Pretty much, it seems, she thought about politics first and the welfare of the people who voted for her second. So if you go back to the 29th, on the evening of the 29th, after Katrina devastated New Orleans, and New Orleans was underwater, FEMA went into action. They reported back to the White House that conditions were worse than expected and that it was too much for the state to handle. Right then, President George W. Bush reached out to the governor and he immediately asked for her to let the federal government take over the relief efforts and let the federal government take control of the National Guard. Well, Governor Blanco, who was held up on the 27th floor of a high-rise hotel in downtown, immediately said no, she would handle it. 2 days later, people were suffering and stuck and stranded, and they still weren't getting any help. President Bush was flying, I want to say from California back to the White House, and they flew over New Orleans in Air Force One. President Bush had him fly low so he could see the devastation with his own eyes. As soon as he returned to the White House, he again asked Governor Blanco to allow him to take over the relief efforts, and she refused again. Because Governor Blanco kept refusing, Bush then sent one of his top men, one of his top generals, down to New Orleans to help with the relief effort.
And I give the president some credit on this. He sent one John Wayne dude down here that could get some stuff done. And his name is General Honoré. And he came off the doggone chopper. And he started cussing and people started moving.
And when he hit the field, we started to see action. And what the state was doing, I don't freaking know.
General Honoré immediately fought backlash, but he refused to let anyone get in his way. He was going to help those people of New Orleans because they weren't getting help from the state. By this time, Governor Blanco was butting heads with everyone. The mayor, General Honoré, FEMA, the Red Cross, the city council, the president, everyone. She was butting heads with everyone. Everyone wanted to get help to the people, but for some reason, the governor kept saying no. So President Bush flew down to New Orleans, and he held a meeting on Air Force One with Governor Blanco and the mayor, Ray Nagin, right there on Air Force One.
We're in Air Force One. I say, Mr. President, Madam Governor, you two have to get in sync. If you don't get in sync, more people are gonna die.
Once that meeting was over, finally, buses rolled into the Superdome to get those people out of there. Those buses transported those people over to Houston and other areas. Eventually, though, the Army Corps of Engineers, they were able to dam up the canal with giant sandbags that they dropped from helicopters. They were able to get the pumps working to start pumping all the water out of the city. And then the rebuilding and the investigations begun into why the levees broke. Today, nearly 15 years later, while most people have moved on, it's still easy to spot the areas in New Orleans that have never recovered, that have never been repaired. That is going to do it for this episode on Hurricane Katrina. I was excited to talk about Hurricane Katrina, even though, as I said, it's a very dark subject, and it's really sad. I want to thank you all so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you're new here, go down and click that subscribe button. Take it a step further, hit that notification bell icon. That way you get notified every time I upload a video. And if you'd like, you can hit that thumbs up down there. That's a big help. If you want to help support the channel, check out the links down in the description box below. It's much appreciated. Thank you all so much. I will see you again tomorrow. We're here in New Orleans again tomorrow, so hopefully it'll be fun. I still have a couple of other videos that I am looking forward to making. Another filming locations video on a different movie, another true crime story, and we'll see what else we want to do while we're here. I hope you all have a great day. Please stay safe and stay